Malcolm, it's great to see you today.
I'm glad. I'm not sure I'm glad to be here. I'm almost terrified that we have to have this discussion, but let's do it.
So, Malcolm, you spent 3 decades working with American intelligence, including 20 years in the US military. But afterwards, you served in the Ukrainian Foreign Legion when the war first began. So, let me ask you, you are someone who obviously cares about Ukraine and obviously cares about national security. But what's happening now in the US? It seems that Ukraine is coming up a lot in the news, but it doesn't seem like the context is very good for Kiev.
Well, as you know, there's been a seismic shift in U.S. policy with regards to Ukraine. And it's not that we didn't warn people that this was potentially coming down the pike with the reelection of Donald Trump as president. He has a very different worldview about Ukraine that, to be quite honest, was colored by Moscow as far back as 2012 when he, after the failure of Mitt Romney to win the presidency, exchanged text messages with a Russian oligarch named Rolobalov, and where he said, I could do this better. And the Russian oligarch texted back, well, if you run for president, we're with you. And he returned a double thumbs up photo from his private jet. 1 week later, he registered Make America Great Again Pact. 2 years later, he was in Moscow for the Miss Universe conference, meeting with the top oligarchs of Russia, representatives of Vladimir Putin. And then in 2014, when Russia invaded Ukraine, he actually criticized Barack Obama and praised Putin for his strength. So over time, people saw that Donald Trump has a relationship with Vladimir Putin in Russia that is bizarre. Bizarre in its subservience, bizarre in its, how can I put it? Um, in its belief that Russia is something that Trump just cannot see. The rest of us see it. I mean, I'm famous for being criticized by Russia Today for saying that Russia is a trailer park with atomic bombs. It's a country that has the gross national product of not even of Texas. We have greater trade ties with Israel and Ecuador, and for some strange reason, its size, Trump's, I don't know, marriages to women from Eastern Europe have given him this belief that everything we see that is empirically wrong with Russia is awesome to him. So as the election was rolling forward and America was focused more on domestic factors, the chaos with Joe Biden dropping out of the race and giving it to Kamala Harris, Donald Trump managed to eke out a very small win in the electorate. Let's make some things clear here. Donald Trump won 31% of the American voting population. Kamala Harris won 30% of the voting population. 1.5% voted for either Jill Stein or Cornel West or RFK Jr., which was not for Donald Trump. And then 37% of the American public, voting public, didn't turn out at all for this election. And so more people did not vote uh, in this election than voted for Donald Trump. But he has seized control of power and has harnessed this mandate, this belief that he has a mandate to change every factor in America, including the relationship with Ukraine. But more important to all of that is you must remember Donald Trump was impeached as president the first time because he tried to extort Ukraine into creating a false investigation of Joe Biden and Hunter Biden. And President Zelensky did not comply. And in fact, the phone call between them was released. And that has created a situation where there is an enmity between Trump and Ukraine. That has now all come to a head over the last week because the worldview of the Trump administration as set by Donald Trump is Russia's good, Ukraine is bad. whereas every other person in the world from the start, from 2014 on, it's been pretty clear that Russia is an oligarchic autocracy dictatorship that is invading its neighbors. And that is where the disconnect happens between American policy today and reality as it exists in the world.
That's fascinating. So when did this all start? What's your research say?
Well, we found some very simple factors here. Is that one, Russia, as early as 2012, started carrying out an extremely intense information warfare campaign against the United States. That campaign just happened to coincide with Donald Trump going to Russia for the Miss Universe pageant. And don't forget, like we said, that Trump himself was being courted by the oligarchy of Russia. And hold on, let me just go back in time, because one critical thing you need to know about Donald Trump, which I wrote about in 4 different books, 4 New York Times bestsellers, is that Donald Trump had been under surveillance by the former Soviet Union's KGB as far back as 1977, when he married Ivana Trump, a woman from the Czech Republic, which at that time was a communist nation. And their intelligence agency, the STB, Czech Intelligence Agency, um, was monitoring all of their phone calls, all of their mail, and actually had her father as a reporting agent to Czech intelligence for the KGB about this rich American millionaire at the time who, by 1988, the Russians saw that they could influence. Trump at that time was very interested in being a negotiator for the START II peace nuclear arms treaties. He was trying to get in touch with Gorbachev. In fact, he got duped by a Gorbachev impersonator who came to Trump Tower because, it was all Gorby mania back then. And then he was invited by the Soviet Union to come to Moscow to talk about a Trump Towers in 1988. And he was treated, by the Russian establishment. Every person handling him was a KGB officer. Everyone he met was part of the Politburo, was part of the Soviet apparatus. And they made such an impression on him that he has always been madly in love with Russia since that time. So when Vladimir Putin, an ex-KGB officer and the first director of Russian intelligence after the fall of the Soviet Union, the FSB, came into power as the prime minister, and then the president of Russia, when he, I'm certain, as an intelligence professional, when he was briefed on Trump, they bought in the 4 rolling carts of reports and studies and analysis of Trump that the KGB would have had going back decades. And this is the difference. Vladimir Putin was a human intelligence officer. I went to his office when studying him for this book. I went to his office in Dresden. I met people that knew him, people that had his entire Stasi file, the East German intelligence agency file and commentary about him. He was a human manipulator. His job was to get people to betray their countries. And unlike the other KGB officers who were there to just drink beer and eat sausages, he did this job and believed in it. When he left at the end of the fall of the Soviet Union, he went back and used those skills in politics. And I believe that he found Donald Trump to be a very easy mark, a person who could easily be flipped. This, of course, colored everything. That relationship between Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin, which is this sort of handler, useful idiot relationship, has just flourished since his first meeting in Helsinki in 2017, where apparently Trump had always wanted to be on the stage equal to a guy of stature of Vladimir Putin, a ruthless dictator. And it is now coming to fruition. And I'm afraid to say it will impact the relationship with Ukraine quite negatively.
So a lot of people have alleged that Donald Trump has close relations with Russia or wishes to establish them. But what's his motivation? Why would he do that on a personal level? What does he gain?
You know, I've written several books about Trump and his relationship, but they were all from the intelligence perspective. And in the intelligence community, when you're trying to recruit an asset or you're trying to recruit a person to betray their own nation, to be an agent, the fundamental four factors that you use, you evaluate a person in, is what we call MICE, M-I-C-E. The first one is always money. Money is always the universal motivator for someone to betray their values, betray their family, betray their country. Donald Trump, when he went to the Miss Universe pageant, went there and met with the top 20 oligarchs in the country. And the one thing that he was focused on, absolutely focused on, was building Trump Tower in Moscow, having a luxury 20-star spa called the Ivanka Spa, and that he had a massive penthouse, multi-story penthouse that would be built on the top of it. But Donald Trump was so focused on this, getting what he thought would be a multi-billion-dollar building with his name written on it in Moscow, in one of the largest countries in the world, at that time could have been attributed as a superpower simply because they had atomic bombs. And he was so convinced of himself that he actually admitted, and when it came out in some of the congressional, senatorial, and the Mueller report studies, he thought he could bribe Vladimir Putin, who is secretly one of the richest men in the world, with an apartment at the top of a Trump Tower, Moscow. He was so focused on money. So money is always the principal recruitment tool in the MICE recruitment strategy. Next comes influence, all right, where you feel that you gain power, you feel that you can gain influence by what you're doing, right? Next, after that, is co-option, where they use you and bring you on whether you know it or not, or coercion, where they blackmail you, which is where they blackmail you and bring you up. Oh, by the way, another part of the I factor is ideology, whether you believe in the same ideology as that. Trump and Putin believe in the same ideology, which is autocratic, dictatorial, oligarch-backed rule. So you're seeing that come out this week, where he has Marco Rubio coming out and making noise like, maybe we should join with Russia and free them up economically and lift sanctions. He does not believe that Russia is a threat to the United States simply because he thinks there's a wallet that he can pick. So back to co-option, coercion are another factor. We've heard about Michael Steele's alleged, tapes, but I don't think it's that. Whatever they have on Donald Trump, I don't think it works as much as money and ideology does. Finally, excitement and ego. These are two factors that they try to invoke in someone who's going to betray their country. Trump is super excited about being bestest buddies with Vladimir Putin, just as he was with Kim Jong-un in North Korea. And then they stroke his ego by, remember, in 2015, when Putin was asked about Trump, he said, oh, he's a colorful, clever guy, very smart. At the time, everyone was ripping him down. So these four factors alone can get you a agent or an asset if manipulated, to flip on him. And I think that's what Vladimir Putin has done. He's bought Donald Trump lock, stock, and barrel.
So that's quite alarming if it's all
Mm,
true. But I'll ask you another question. You've
mm.
written another book looking into the followers of Donald Trump, who they are. And you came away saying that they don't look very pro-democracy and they look like they could be, in fact, a threat for American democracy. What was the background to that? And do you think that's something that Russia is paying attention to?
Yeah, I actually touch on this in a couple of different books. In Plot to Destroy Democracy, which is how Putin used Russian intelligence to buy and to influence right-wing extremist political parties throughout Europe and the United States. National Front National, right? National Front in France. Alternative for Deutschland, right? AfD in Germany, which is now the third largest party in Germany. The neo-Nazi party in Greece, separatists in Spain. all of these were being done by Russia and United Russia, his political party, with the assistance of Russian intelligence and Russian oligarch money. He did that in the United States. He pretty much bought the alt-right in the United States, American extremist evangelicals, by holding evangelical conferences in the United States. And there was by 2016, there was an entire wing of the most extreme right conservatives in the United States who believed that Russia was a benign country, a country made up of Christians that were going to assist America in eliminating the Muslim threat in the world. And, one guy was constantly going around and preaching about the Beslan massacre in Russia and how Chechen and Ingushetin terrorists came to this school and killed hundreds of children. Well, in fact, it was the Russian army just storming it, causing suicide bombs to go off, slaughtering just about everybody, that caused this massacre. And this block of Americans started to believe maybe Russia is really the Holy Land with regards to the way that they operate in a white supremacist Christian nationalist world. And by 2016, that had turned into a hardcore of the Republican Party. And Vladimir Putin sent agents over to bring them on board through the National Rifle Association. You might recall a comely young Russian intelligence officer who the FBI arrested, who was co-opting American politicians and American organizations to support Russia. In fact, she asked the first question Donald Trump ever answered in an official press conference in his run for president, was put there, but was speaking to a Russian FSB officer. So with all of these factors, now things have changed dramatically since January 6, 2020. Virtually every person in MAGA, in the Trump's MAGA movement, believes Russia is a, how can I put it, a greater influence and a more more legitimate country than Democratic Party governments. I actually have in my collection a T-shirt that says, "I'd rather be a Russian than a Democrat," and people were wearing this at Trump rallies. So that gives you an idea of the mindset. The only problem is many of these people are armed and violent, and who knows what will happen. With groups like neo-Nazi fascist groups that worship Trump's every word. If they align themselves with Moscow's bidding.
So that's very alarming, Malcolm.
Mm.
And it's not looking very good. But looking ahead, what should we expect then? If all this is true, it sounds like it's a recipe for disaster, and we're on the highway to having a major catastrophe. But what's your analysis? What should we expect?
And I'm speaking to you as an intelligence professional. I am not speaking as a partisan. Most people who know me know that I was a Republican most of my life. I'm one of those never, and then I changed to the Democratic Party, but I would have been considered one of those never Trump Republicans because my loyalty is to the Constitution of the United States, not to the person sitting in the seat of the President of the United States. But what we've seen just in the last few weeks is essentially, here's an analogy. It's akin to someone giving a monkey, a drunk monkey, a automatic machine gun and hand grenades and sending them into every agency of the U.S. government. We are watching the United States bureaucratic infrastructure be destroyed. And interestingly enough, the first organization that was attacked was one that Moscow and China, both the Soviet Union and Communist China, always saw as America's greatest strength, right? The charity and influence of the United States through John F. Kennedy's U.S. Agency for International Development. We all remember those food bags that would go to Somalia or Ethiopia or Burma, someplace after a famine that had no real political connection, which would read on it, show two hands holding over a shield of red, white, and blue that said, "A gift from the people of the United States," right? Food. food that we would give from American farmers, buying American farmer stocks and using the gift of food, the ability to stop people from starving, um, all across this world. And people bought into that in American culture. That was just dismantled by a man who was throwing Nazi salutes off the presidential dais on the inauguration day, who is a South African, well-assumed, believer in this white supremacist nationalist identity. I just can't believe it that America would disarm itself with its greatest tools. So that being said, what is going to happen here? There's going to be a crash. The US government is going to come to a crashing halt. Money will stop. There will be economic hardship. Eggs, it's like we live in Russia, right? You know how in Russia, eggs went up as the Russian economy was crashing. America, some parts of the United States, eggs are $12 a dozen. They're still $6, $4 to $6 where I am. That's still 267% rise in its price since Donald Trump became president of the United States, principally because he doesn't believe in science and bird flu is now devastating all of the farming communities and he doesn't think it's an emergency. So this vapidity, this mindlessness, this ignorance, this hatred of science and tradition is going to really damage America in the long run. And I got to be honest with you. I served in the Ukrainian armed forces. I love Ukraine. I served with honor to help Ukraine remain a free and prosperous nation. But America does not possess the guts and the adaptiveness and the intrepidity of that we had in my parents' generation and previous generations that I see in the Ukrainian people all day. So that being said, I also am going to make a quick prediction here. There will be a change. And Vladimir Putin himself warned Donald Trump that he had to be on guard from a color revolution because of the Rose Revolution in Georgia, the Kazakh color revolution, the Orange Revolution in Ukraine in 2014, where people power forced a dictator and oligarch out of power. And Putin is terrified of that. And he's even more terrified that the first words of the US Constitution are, "We the people." And I believe that America is going to suffer in the next couple of years, not suffer, will be required to have in the next couple of years the blue revolution, where the American people, both who will be suffering shortly, all of the ones who didn't vote for Trump and all of the ones who didn't come out, including those Trumpers who are going to be affected, who lose food stamps, farms, their cars, their houses, lost their government jobs. I believe they are going to come together and they are going to demand some major, major changes. But I think there will be a second American revolution that's nonviolent, that will be peaceful, like Ukraine's Orange Revolution, and that it will happen to save the values of the first American Revolution, which is that, we believe in democracy and that we hold the truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal. So that, I believe, is what's going to happen in the United States. And it is not going to be violent unless Donald Trump makes it violent. But he is a dictator wannabe, so all bets are off on that point.
So, Malcolm, it does seem that America is changing very, very quickly. And I know that you and I both are big fans of Norman Rockwell, and it doesn't look like we're living in a Norman Rockwell painting at this
No.
point in time. So, looking ahead, though, what should we expect? What does this mean that the US is demanding minerals and valuable metals from Ukraine? What's this all going to sum up to?
I will tell you right now, okay? I know I fall back on my service, but I am a proud member. I still believe, support and fund my battalion, 3rd Battalion International Legion. Um, on a daily basis, I'm talking to my guys. We're buying them equipment, paying for funerals, helping families. And I will tell you right now, this idea that the that a president of the United States would send the vice president of the United States with a document in which he intended to extort a country fighting for its liberty and its freedom of 50% of all of its material wealth to support advanced technologies for Elon Musk, and then to also have to accept 50% of all future earnings? That's worse than what not Nazi Germany, Weimar Germany got out of Versailles at the end of World War I, which led to World War II. I will tell you right now, I took part in the Kharkiv counteroffensive in 2022, and I helped liberate almost 1,000 square kilometers of Ukraine and hundreds of villages. I, speaking as a former Ukrainian army soldier, will be goddamned if I would if I would support Ukraine and Ukrainians into making a deal like that. Ukraine has sacrificed greatly in this war, greatly. Every person, every individual in the country knows someone or has a family member who is in service. And to say, yeah, we'll give up Donbass, we'll give up Luhansk, we'll give up Zaporizhia, we'll give up Crimea, and then we'll allow Russia to mine there. And then America will come into all the other provinces, Mykolaiv and, the Western Donbass, and then they will take all of our mineral wealth. It's laughable. It's laughable. It can't be a serious proposal, but it did come from the president of the United States. Ukraine's future is in the hands of Ukrainians and Ukrainians alone. And they will share their wealth with those people who ally themselves. Turkey was the first country to come right out and say that is off the table. And we suspect that most European countries will come along with Ukraine and, help Ukraine win this war if America backs out of it. Let me tell you something. The South Korean, European defense industries are going to go through an explosion of growth. And despite what, the entrepreneurial, transactional president of the United States may think, there is a future weapons market for being prepared for a peer-to-peer adversary war. India stopped buying Russian equipment. But let me tell you something. If Europe gets its act together and assists Ukraine and helps them win this war, Germany's Rheinmetall built a factory of artillery shells that's churning out hundreds of thousands of artillery shells being built in Ukraine. The drone industry in Ukraine has revolutionized all warfare. They are going to be a world power on the defense market, and it will all have been tested in combat. If worse comes to worse, I've said this before. I actually had a meeting with one of your deputy minister of defenses in the days before the Russian invasion. And I said, I know you Ukrainians. You don't need guns. You'll throw rocks and beat them with sticks if you have to, but you will not surrender. You will not be slaves. And they were like, you are goddamn right. That is exactly what's going to happen here. So with these deals, I don't know what will happen. I don't know whether President Zelensky pushing back against Trump will continue U.S. weapons. But NATO is still there so long as the NATO still represents 32 other countries that are not the United States. And yeah, America has a lot of throw power, has a lot of throw weight, but France is sending in Mirage 2000s now, and they're just as capable of F-16s in dropping bombs and launching missiles. In fact, they may be, these bomb truck missile platforms may be more capable. But Ukraine will survive this no matter what happens.
Ukraine undoubtedly will survive this. Malcolm, thank you for your time today. It was great chatting with you.
It is always my pleasure.